The research station floated in the dark space between two dead moons. Dr. Nexiat looked out through the thick glass windows at the endless black. His long, thin fingers tapped against the metal desk as he read the latest reports. The Velthari. Confederation had been studying pain for over 300 years. They had tested 47 different species from across the galaxy. Every single one had broken under their careful methods. Pain was the key to everything, Nexiat believed. Find out how much pain a species could take, and you could control them completely, break their will, and they would do anything you wanted. It was simple science. The door to his lab hissed open. Captain Yintel walked in, her four arms moving in the formal greeting pattern. Her skin was the pale blue color of deep space, and her eyes were completely black. "Doctor," she said in their clicking language, "we have new specimens for you." Nexiat turned away from the window. "What species this time?" "They call themselves humans, from a small planet called Earth. They only discovered faster than light. Travel 50 years ago, very primitive." "Primitive species usually break quickly," Nexiat said. He felt pleased. Easy work meant good results for his research. "How many did you capture?" "5 of them. We took them from different locations on their planet. We made sure to get different types, workers, fighters, thinkers, the usual variety for complete testing." Nexiat nodded. This was standard procedure. Test different kinds from the same species to see if some were stronger than others. Usually, it made no difference. Pain was pain, and every species had a breaking point. "Where are they now?" "In the holding cells. Do you want to see them before testing begins?" "Yes. I always like to observe the specimens first." They walked through the long corridors of the station. The walls were made of smooth metal that reflected their shapes as they moved. Other Velthari scientists worked in labs behind glass doors. Some were testing chemical weapons. Others studied the effects of cold and heat on alien tissue. But Nexiat's work was the most important. Pain broke minds, faster than anything else. The holding area was deep inside the station. 5 separate cells lined one wall, each one protected by energy barriers that would kill anyone who touched them. Nexiat stopped in front of the first cell and looked inside. A human male sat on the floor with his back against the wall. He was shorter than most species they had tested, with dark hair and brown skin. His clothes were torn and dirty from the capture. When he saw Nexiat watching, he stood up and walked to the barrier. "Let me guess," the human said in perfect galactic standard language. "You're the scientist who's going to torture us." Nexiat was surprised. Most species cowered when they first saw the Velthari. This human showed no fear at all. His voice was calm and steady. "I am Dr. Nexiat. I study pain tolerance across different species. You are specimen A1. I'm Kang Minho," the human said. "I build things back home. Big buildings, bridges, roads. Hard work that breaks your body every day." He smiled, showing white teeth. "I'm used to pain." Nexiat made notes on his datapad. Specimen claimed familiarity with physical discomfort. This was interesting but not unusual. Many warrior species made similar claims before testing began. He moved to the second cell. A human female stood near the back wall. She had long black hair and wore what looked like medical clothing. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent as she watched him approach. "And you are?" "Park Ji-hye. I'm a doctor. I work in trauma surgery." She stepped closer to the barrier. "I've seen every kind of injury you can imagine. I've cut people open to save their lives. I've held beating hearts in my hands." Her voice was steady, professional. "I know exactly how the body responds to damage." This was more concerning. A medical professional would understand their testing methods better than most. But knowledge of pain didn't make someone immune to it. Nexiat had tested doctors from other species before. They all broke eventually. The third cell held a young male who looked barely adult by human standards. He sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed, as if he was sleeping or thinking deeply. "Specimen A3, Nexiat called. The young human opened his eyes and looked up. "Lee Dongwu. I study engineering at university." He stood up and walked to the barrier. "I can see your energy field generators from here. Interesting design, but not very efficient. You're wasting about 30% of your power output." Nexiat stared at him. The human was analyzing their technology while being held prisoner. This level of calm was unusual, even for warrior species. You are not afraid? Of course I'm afraid, Dongwu said. But fear doesn't stop thinking. My professors always said, the best engineers work well under pressure. The fourth cell contained another female. She was sitting on the floor doing what looked like exercises, moving her body in controlled patterns. Her muscles were clearly defined, and she moved with the grace of a trained fighter. Kim Nayan, she said before Nexiot could speak. Mountain rescue specialist. I spend my time saving people from avalanches, rockfalls, and extreme weather. She continued her exercises while talking. I've been buried in snow for 16 hours, climbed mountains in storms that killed other people, and carried injured climbers down cliffs that would terrify most species. And yet here you are, captured and helpless. Nayon smiled. Captured, yes. Helpless? We'll see about that. The final cell held a male who appeared to be checking the walls and ceiling carefully. He moved systematically, examining every surface, with professional attention. Choi Seung-ho, he said when Nexiot approached. Former military medic. I've treated battlefield injuries under enemy fire. I've performed surgery in caves while bombs exploded overhead. He stopped his examination and looked directly at Nexiot. I've also been trained to resist interrogation and torture. All training fails eventually, Nexiot said. Maybe, but it might take longer than you expect. Nexiot finished his observations and returned to his lab with Captain Yintel. The humans were certainly confident, but that meant nothing. Confidence faded quickly under proper pressure. When do you begin testing? Yintel asked. Tomorrow. I want to start with the construction worker. Physical laborers usually have higher pain tolerance, but they also break more completely when they reach their limit. The Confederation is eager for results. These humans have been adapting to our technology faster than expected. Command wants to know their weaknesses. Every species has the same weakness, Nexiot said. Pain is universal. Fear is universal. I will find their breaking point within 3 days. That night, Nexiot reviewed the files on human physiology that their scouts had gathered. Humans were carbon-based, like most species. They had standard nervous systems, standard pain receptors, standard brain chemistry. Nothing in their biology suggested unusual resistance to suffering. Their planet was harsh compared to most worlds that produced intelligent life. Extreme weather, dangerous animals, poisonous plants. But many species evolved on difficult worlds. It rarely made much difference during testing. What did interest him were some of the cultural reports. Humans seemed to voluntarily endure pain for various reasons. They had activities called sports, where they deliberately injured themselves competing against each other. They had exercise, where they pushed their bodies beyond comfort to make them stronger. Some even had religious practices that involved deliberate suffering. But voluntary pain was different from involuntary pain. When someone chose to suffer, they could stop whenever they wanted. When pain was forced on them by others, the psychological effect was completely different. The mind broke much faster when it had no control. Nexiot prepared his equipment for the next day. Neural pain inducers that could create any sensation of injury without actual damage. Tissue stimulators that could simulate burning, cutting, or crushing. Psychological pressure devices that could create terror, despair, and hopelessness directly in the brain. 47 species had faced these tools. 47 species had broken completely. The humans would be number 48. He looked out at the dark space beyond his window and felt satisfied. Tomorrow would begin another successful study. Within days, the Confederation would have complete data on human weaknesses. Another primitive species would be ready for conquest or control. Nexiot had no idea that he was about to encounter something completely outside his experience, something that would challenge everything he believed about pain, fear, and the limits of intelligent life. The humans were already talking to each other through the walls, sharing information and making plans. They weren't waiting to be broken. They were preparing to resist. And resistance, as Nexiot would soon learn, was something humans had spent thousands of years perfecting. The testing chamber was a perfect white cube with no shadows or hiding places. Kang Minho sat strapped to a metal chair in the center of the room. Thick cables connected his head and body to machines that hummed quietly around him. Dr. Nexiat watched from behind a protective barrier, his 4 assistants ready at their control stations. Beginning initial pain threshold test, Nexiat announced to his recording device. Subject A1, human male, age approximately 30 standard years. Starting at level 1 intensity, a mild electrical current flowed through the neural inducer attached to Minho's spine. It was designed to create the sensation of a minor cut on the arm. Most species would flinch or cry out. Minho didn't even blink. Level 1 shows no response, one assistant reported. Shall we proceed to level 2? Yes. Continue. Level 2 felt like multiple cuts across the chest and arms. Minho shifted slightly in his chair but remained silent. His heart rate increased by only 10% according to the monitors. Still no verbal response at level 2, the assistant said. This is unusual. Nexiat frowned. Even the toughest warrior species showed some reaction by level 2. The Krex battle lords, famous across the galaxy for their endurance, usually grunted or tensed their muscles. This human sat calmly as if nothing was happening. Level 3. The pain sensation jumped to severe burns across 30% of the body. This was where most species began screaming. The few that didn't scream at least showed clear distress, rapid breathing, sweating, begging for it to stop. Minho looked directly at the observation window. Is that all you've got? He asked. His voice was steady, almost casual. The assistants looked at each other in confusion. Their instruments showed the neural inducers working perfectly. The pain signals were reaching the human's brain at full intensity. But somehow, he wasn't breaking. Level 4, Nexiat ordered. This level simulated multiple bone fractures combined, with severe tissue damage. The reading showed pain levels that had made Krex warriors beg for mercy within minutes. Minho gritted his teeth, and his breathing became heavier, but he still didn't scream. You know, Minho said through clenched jaw, this reminds me of the time I fell off a construction crane, broke 3 ribs and my left arm, walked 2 kilometers to get help. He managed a painful smile. That hurt worse than this. Impossible, one assistant whispered. The readings show maximum neural activity. He should be unconscious from the pain. Level 5, Nexiat said. His voice had lost its earlier confidence. Level 5 was torture that killed weaker species outright. The simulated pain of being slowly burned alive while having limbs crushed. No species had ever remained conscious past level 5 without breaking. Completely! Minho screamed now, but it was a scream of rage, not surrender. You alien bastards! He shouted. My grandfather survived Japanese torture camps. My father worked 16-hour days in factories that killed other men. You think this breaks me? Sweat poured down his face and his whole body shook, but his eyes remained focused and angry. The monitors showed impossible readings, pain levels that should have caused immediate unconsciousness. Yet the human remained not just awake, but defiant. End the session, Nexiat ordered. They moved Minho back to his cell and brought out Park Jihye. If the construction worker had unusual pain tolerance, perhaps the medical professional would be more normal. Jihye examined the testing chair with professional interest as they strapped her in. Standard neural interface, she observed. Direct pain induction without actual tissue damage. Clever design, but it has limitations. What limitations? Nexiat asked, despite himself. You're triggering pain receptors directly, but you're not accounting for the brain's natural adaptation mechanisms. Humans learn to process pain differently based on context and expectation. She settled back in the chair. But please, continue your experiment. I'm curious about your methodology. They started at level 3, expecting faster results from someone who understood medical procedures. Jihye's reaction was purely clinical. Interesting, she said as the pain signals hit her brain. You're targeting the anterior cingulate cortex and the thalamus, but you're missing the periaqueductal gray matter. That's where humans process pain modulation. At level 4, she began analyzing her own responses. Heart rate elevated to 120 beats per minute. Stress hormone release detected, but pain tolerance holding steady. She paused as a particularly intense wave hit her. You might want to adjust your frequency modulation. This is impossible, the lead assistant said. She's giving us technical advice while being tortured. Level 5 made Jia gasp and close her eyes, but she continued talking. The pain is considerable, similar to emergency surgery without proper anesthesia. I've performed that procedure twice during earthquake rescues. Her voice was strained but controlled. The key is compartmentalizing the sensation, treating it as information rather than experience. Nexiat called for another break. 2 humans, 2 impossible results. Perhaps the young student would be different. Li Dongwu was actually taking notes when they brought him to the testing chamber. He had somehow acquired a piece of metal and was scratching calculations on the wall of his cell. Working on an engineering problem, he explained as they strapped him in. I've been analyzing the power consumption of your facility based on the vibrations in the walls. Your energy distribution is fascinating, but inefficient. They started Dongwu at level 4, hoping to skip the lower levels entirely. The pain hit him like a physical blow, and he doubled over as much as the restraints allowed. Okay, he gasped. That's really unpleasant. He took several deep breaths and then looked up at the observation window. But your timing is off. The neural pulses are arriving in a predictable pattern. The brain adapts to patterns. At level 5, Dongwu began solving math problems out loud. Between screams and gasps of pain, he worked through complex engineering equations. If you randomize the intervals, the psychological impact would be greater, he managed to say. Also, your power coupling is still creating energy waste. The assistants stared at their instruments in disbelief. The human was experiencing agony that had broken the strongest warriors in the galaxy, and he was giving them suggestions for improvement. Level 6, Nexiat ordered desperately. Level 6 had never been used on living subjects. It was designed for testing equipment limits, not actual torture. The pain simulation was beyond what any biological being should survive. Dongwu screamed until his voice broke, his body convulsing against the restraints. But when the worst wave passed, he looked up with tears streaming down his face and said, "Is that the best your technology can do? Because I think I understand how to beat it." "How?" Nexiat asked before he could stop himself. "Pain is just electrical signals. Signals can be interrupted, redirected, or overwhelmed with competing inputs." Dongwu managed a weak smile. "It's an engineering problem, and I'm really good at solving problems." They ended the session and moved to Kim Nayeon. The rescue specialist looked around the testing chamber with the eye of someone who had seen dangerous situations before. Mountain rescue involves a lot of pain management, she said conversationally as they attached the neural inducers. Broken bones, frostbite, altitude sickness. You learn to work through it or people die. At level 3, she began doing breathing exercises. Deep, controlled breaths that seemed to help her manage the pain signals. In avalanche survival, panic kills you faster than cold or injury, she explained. Control your breathing, control your mind, stay focused on the goal. Level 4 made her grimace and clench her fists, but she continued the breathing pattern. I once spent 14 hours buried in snow with a dislocated shoulder and 2 broken ribs. This is worse than that, but the principle is the same. Endure until rescue comes. At level 5, Nayeon began planning. Through gritted teeth, she started describing the layout of the facility she had memorized. Guard rotation every 4 hours, 3 patrols in the main corridor, security sensors at every junction, but they're motion-based, not thermal. She paused to scream, then continued. Escape route through the maintenance shafts, 14 guards. Total. Probably never faced real resistance. Level 6 pushed her to her limits. She couldn't speak through the pain, but she didn't beg for mercy. Instead, she stared at the observation window with pure determination, as if memorizing every face she saw. Finally, they brought Choi Seung-ho to the testing chamber. The former medic examined the equipment with professional interest. Military-grade torture device, he said calmly. I've been trained to resist this type of interrogation. The key is mental preparation and compartmentalization. They started. Him at level 5 immediately. Seung-ho's response was textbook military resistance. Name, Choi Seung-ho. Rank, Sergeant Medical Corps. Serial number. He recited his military information while the pain signals flooded his nervous system. At level 6, he began reciting medical procedures. Primary assessment of trauma patient, airway, breathing, circulation. Secondary assessment, vital signs, neurological function, pain scale evaluation. Level 7 existed only in theory. No machine had ever been pushed that far. The power requirements were enormous, and the neural feedback could damage the equipment itself. Seung-ho convulsed, and Dr. Nexiat stood before the Confederation Council's holographic projectors, his confidence shaken for the first time in decades. The alien faces looking back at him showed increasing impatience as he struggled to explain his lack of progress. 3 weeks, Doctor. Admiral Kethvar's voice clicked through the speakers. 3 weeks with 5 specimens and you have nothing to report? The humans are unusual, Nexiat admitted. They show resistance beyond normal parameters. I request permission to implement advanced protocols. Advanced protocols were developed for the most resilient species we've encountered. Are you saying these primitive humans are stronger than Krex battlelords? In terms of pain tolerance, yes. Their neural responses suggest they feel pain normally, but their psychological reactions are completely outside expected ranges. General Yexthul's image flickered forward. Then break their minds instead of their bodies. Use isolation, fear, psychological pressure, find their weakness. Permission granted for full advanced protocol implementation, Admiral Kethvar decided, but we want results within 1 week, or we'll find another researcher. The connection ended, leaving Nexiat alone with his failures. He had built his career on understanding pain and breaking will. These humans threatened everything he believed about the science of suffering. He activated the facility's advanced systems that had been used only twice before, both times on species that had resisted standard torture for longer than expected. The results had been quick and complete breakdowns within days. The first new protocol was total isolation. Each human was moved to a special cell with no light, no sound, and no contact with anything except smooth walls. The temperature was kept, just cold enough to be uncomfortable but not dangerous. They were fed through slots that opened and closed without warning. Most species began hallucinating within 72 hours of complete sensory deprivation. The psychological pressure of absolute nothingness broke minds faster than physical pain. After 5 days, Nexiat checked on his subjects. Kang Minho had turned isolation into a mental exercise. He was doing construction calculations in his head, designing entire buildings from memory. When guards checked on him, he was lying on his back with his eyes closed, completely relaxed. Day 5 of isolation, he said without opening his eyes. I've mentally built a 40-story office complex, 3 apartment buildings, and a bridge that could span the Han River. This is actually quite peaceful once you get used to it. Park Ji-hee was using the darkness to practice surgical procedures. She moved her hands in precise patterns, performing operations on imaginary patients. Her medical training had taught her to work in high-stress situations, and isolation was just another form of pressure. Isolation therapy is sometimes used for treating severe psychological trauma, she said when questioned. The brain learns to process experiences differently when external stimuli are removed. It's actually quite therapeutic if you approach it correctly. Lee Dongwoo had somehow figured out the exact dimensions of his cell by feeling the walls and counting his steps. He was working through advanced mathematics problems, using the smooth walls as mental blackboards for complex equations. I've calculated the power requirements for your entire facility based on the electrical hum in the walls, he announced when guards entered his cell. Your energy efficiency is still terrible. I could redesign your power systems to cut consumption by 40%. Kim Naeon was using isolation as endurance training. She performed exercise routines in the dark, keeping her body and mind sharp through physical discipline. When checked on, she was doing push-ups and planning escape routes. Mountain rescue often involves working alone in complete darkness, she explained between exercises. Cave rescues, night operations, blizzard conditions where you can't see your own hands. This is actually good training. Choi Sang-ho was meditating and practicing mental resistance techniques. Military training had prepared him for exactly this kind of psychological pressure. He remained calm and focused, treating isolation as just another form of enemy action. Isolation is a standard interrogation technique, he said matter-of-factly. The key is maintaining mental discipline and not letting imagination create fears that don't exist. I've been trained for this. After a week of isolation had failed completely, Nexiot implemented the next protocol: fear induction, advanced neural devices that could create specific terror responses directly in the brain. Phobias, panic attacks, and primal fears triggered, without any external stimulus. The machines could simulate the terror of falling from great heights, being eaten alive, drowning, burning, or being crushed. Most species broke within hours when their deepest fears were activated directly in their minds. Kang Minho experienced the sensation of falling from an enormous height, while building equipment collapsed around him. His worst fear, drawn from memories of construction accidents. But instead of breaking down, he began analyzing the safety violations that would cause such failures. Poor scaffolding design, he said through gritted teeth as artificial terror flooded his mind. Inadequate safety protocols, no proper fall protection equipment. Even while experiencing artificial fear, he was thinking like an engineer. In real construction, we have backup systems for everything. Park Ji-hee's induced fears centered on losing patients during surgery, watching people die because of her failures. But her medical training kicked in automatically. Even while experiencing artificial panic, she began describing proper emergency procedures. Patient going into cardiac arrest. Begin CPR immediately. Epinephrine 1 milligram intravenous. Push. Check for airway obstruction. She was treating simulated medical disasters as learning exercises, not sources of terror. Lee Dongwoo experienced fears of academic failure, of being too stupid to solve important problems, but he responded by working through increasingly difficult mathematical proofs in his head, proving to himself that his mind was still sharp. Fear is just another variable in the equation, he said, while artificial anxiety attacked his mind. You identify the source, analyze the probability, and develop solutions. Basic problem-solving methodology. Kim Nyan's fears involved people dying because she couldn't reach them in time, rescue missions failing because of her mistakes. But she used the artificial scenarios as training simulations, mentally rehearsing better rescue techniques. In mountain rescue, fear gets people killed, she said while experiencing artificial terror of avalanches. You acknowledge the fear, assess the real risks, and focus on the mission. People are depending on you to stay calm and competent. Choi Sung-ho experienced battlefield fears, soldiers dying because of his medical failures, being unable to save wounded comrades under fire. But his military training turned even artificial fear into useful information. Fear analysis is part of tactical assessment, he said while simulated combat terror flooded his nervous system. Identify threats, evaluate responses, maintain operational effectiveness. Standard military doctrine. Nexiot watched these impossible results with growing desperation. Not only were the humans resisting advanced psychological torture, they were somehow turning it into productive mental exercises. He implemented the final protocol, combined physical and psychological pressure with sleep deprivation and nutritional stress. Constant low-level pain combined with irregular feeding, random temperature changes, loud noises at unpredictable intervals, and bright lights that prevented rest. This protocol had broken every previous subject within 4 days. The combination of multiple stressors prevented the mind from adapting to any single pressure, but the humans adapted anyway. Worse, they began working together. They had learned to communicate through the walls by tapping in patterns. Kang Minho taught construction techniques for staying alert during long shifts. Park Ji-hye shared medical knowledge about managing pain and stress. Lee Dongwoo calculated optimal rest patterns despite irregular schedules. Kim Nayeon trained the others in physical endurance techniques she had learned in mountain rescue. Choi Seung-ho taught military methods for staying mentally sharp under combined pressure. Day 12 of combined protocol, Nexiot recorded in growing frustration. Subjects continue to resist all advanced psychological and physical pressure. They appear to be sharing information and supporting each other despite complete physical separation. The humans had somehow turned imprisonment into a team-building exercise. They were actually becoming stronger and more coordinated as the torture continued. Kang Minho was teaching the others about construction project management through wall taps. In construction, you always have multiple problems at the same time. Weather delays, equipment failures, safety issues, budget problems. You learn to handle everything simultaneously or projects fail. Park Jae shared medical techniques for EC, managing pain without medication. Surgery often involves working through your own physical discomfort. 12-hour operations while standing, concentrating through hunger and fatigue. The human body can endure much more than people realize. Lee Dongwoo was helping the others approach their situation as an engineering problem. We have limited resources but unlimited time. We gather information, analyze patterns, and develop solutions. Every problem can be solved with enough data and logical thinking. Kim Naeun taught stress management techniques from Extreme. Dr. Nexiat had not slept in 3 days. His 4 eyes were bloodshot from staring at brain scan data that made no sense. The neural mapping equipment showed impossible readings from the human subjects. Their brains were doing things that violated every principle of psychology he had learned in 2 centuries of research. Computer, display comparative brain scan analysis for subjects A1 through A5, he commanded. The holographic display showed 5 human brain patterns, alongside data from 47 other species. Every previous subject showed the same progression. Initial stress response, followed by adaptation attempts, then breakdown of neural pathways under sustained pressure, and finally complete psychological collapse. The human brains showed a completely different pattern. Under stress, their neural pathways became more complex, not simpler. New connections formed between brain regions that normally worked independently. Instead of breaking down, the human minds were literally rewiring themselves to become more resistant to pain and fear. This is impossible, Nexiat muttered to himself. Neuroplasticity should decrease under extreme stress, not increase. He pulled up Kang Minho's brain scans first. After 3 weeks of torture, the construction worker's brain showed 40% more neural connections than when testing began. The pain processing centers had developed new pathways that seemed to redirect suffering into problem-solving areas. Subject A1 demonstrates unprecedented neuroplasticity under stress conditions, he recorded. Pain signals are being processed through regions normally associated with creative thinking and spatial reasoning. The subject appears to be literally thinking his way through torture. Park Jae-hye's scans were even more remarkable. Her medical training had created baseline neural efficiency that was already above average. But under torture, her brain had developed new connections between pain processing and analytical thinking that allowed her to study her own suffering as if it were happening to someone else. Subject A2 shows complete compartmentalization of pain experience, Nexiat noted. She is simultaneously experiencing full pain sensation while maintaining clinical detachment. This should be psychologically impossible for any species. Lee Dongwoo's brain scans showed the most dramatic changes. The young engineer's neural patterns had reorganized to treat every stimulus, including torture, as data to be analyzed and understood. His pain centers were feeding information directly into mathematical processing areas. Subject A3 has developed neural pathways that convert sensory input into mathematical models, Nexiat recorded in amazement. He is literally calculating his way through torture, turning suffering into equations to be solved. Kim Naeun's scans revealed a brain that had learned to process extreme stress as motivation rather than breakdown stimulus. Her rescue training had prepared neural pathways that treated dangerous situations as problems requiring immediate action rather than sources of paralyzing fear. Subject A4 demonstrates stress response inversion, Nexiat noted. Increasing pressure triggers enhanced problem-solving ability and physical coordination. She becomes more capable under torture, not less. Choi Sung-ho's military training had created the most organized stress response. His brain showed textbook compartmentalization. Pain, fear, and other negative stimuli were processed through separate neural pathways that did not interfere with rational thinking or decision-making. Subject A5 maintains complete cognitive function under extreme duress, Nexiat recorded. Military conditioning has created neural separation between emotional response and logical processing. He can think clearly while experiencing agony. But the individual brain changes were not the most disturbing discovery. Nexiat had detected something that should have been impossible. The humans were somehow synchronizing their neural activity through the facility's walls. Computer analyzed temporal correlation between subject brain patterns. The display showed unmistakable evidence of coordinated neural activity. When one human was under stress, the others showed sympathetic brain patterns. They were somehow sharing the psychological load of torture across the group. Impossible, Nexiat said out loud. There is no mechanism for telepathic communication between separated subjects. But the data was clear. The humans had learned to tap messages through the walls in patterns that created shared mental states. When Kang Minho was being tortured, the others showed neural activity consistent with providing emotional support. When Park Jae was analyzing her medical situation, the others demonstrated brain patterns associated with learning and information processing. They had turned torture into a group learning experience. Nexiat decided to investigate human culture and history to understand what had created such impossible mental resilience. The Confederation's databases contained basic information about Earth and human civilization. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about intelligent life. Humans had been torturing themselves for thousands of years, not as punishment or research, but as improvement. They called it training, exercise, sport, and challenge. They deliberately sought out pain, hardship, and stress because they believed it made them stronger. The database showed images of humans running until their bodies collapsed, then running further. They climbed mountains that killed them, dove to depths that crushed them, and lifted weights until their muscles tore. They called this recreation. They torture themselves for fun, Nexiat whispered in disbelief. But it was worse than that. Humans had built entire cultures around voluntary suffering. Warriors who trained by fighting each other until they bled. Athletes who pushed their bodies beyond biological limits just to move faster or jump higher than other humans. Workers who labored in conditions that would kill most species, not because they had to, but because they took pride in their endurance. The database showed human extreme sports, activities designed purely to create maximum danger and pain for entertainment. Humans threw themselves off mountains with small pieces of cloth to slow their fall. They strapped wheels to their feet and hurled themselves down hills at deadly speeds. They jumped into freezing water, ran across burning coals, and competed to see who could endure the most suffering. Computer. Analyze human cultural practices related to voluntary pain endurance. The results were overwhelming. Every human culture had traditions of deliberately seeking out hardship. Religious practices that involved fasting, self-denial, and physical suffering. Coming-of-age ceremonies that tested young humans by inflicting pain. Military training that was designed to break people down completely before building them up, stronger. Humans didn't just endure pain, they sought it out, studied it, and used it as a tool for self-improvement. Nexiat found records of human marathon running, events where humans ran until their bodies began shutting down, then continued, running anyway. The distances were beyond what should be survivable, yet thousands of humans participated voluntarily. He found descriptions of human boxing and martial arts, combat sports, where humans hit each other until one could no longer continue, purely for entertainment and skill development. Most disturbing were the records of human extreme endurance events. Humans who stayed awake for weeks, who sat in meditation without moving for months, who walked across entire continents carrying heavy loads just to prove they could do it. They have spent their entire evolutionary history training themselves to endure the impossible, Nexiat realized. But the cultural evidence led to an even more shocking discovery. Humans had been using torture as a method of information gathering for thousands of years. They knew every technique Nexiat was using because they had invented most of them themselves. The database contained detailed records of human torture methods throughout history. Physical pain, psychological pressure, isolation, fear induction, sleep deprivation. Humans had developed and refined these techniques over millennia. More importantly, they had also developed resistance methods. Military training included specific preparation for torture and interrogation. Religious traditions taught mental techniques for enduring suffering. Athletic training built physical and psychological resilience that could withstand extreme pressure. The humans in his facility were not experiencing anything new or unknown. They were experiencing updated versions of challenges their own species had been inflicting on each other for thousands of years. Computer. Cross-reference human torture resistance. Training with observed subject behavior patterns. The correlation was perfect. Everything the humans were doing, the mental compartmentalization, the group support, the analytical approach to pain, the physical endurance techniques, All of it matched documented human resistance training methods. Kang. Minho's construction background had taught him to work through physical pain and exhaustion as part of normal job requirements. Park Ji-hye's medical training included learning to function under extreme stress while making life-or-death decisions. Lee Dongwoo's engineering education had taught him to treat every problem as solvable through logical analysis. Kim Naeun's rescue work had specifically prepared her for exactly the kind of situation she was now in, being trapped in a dangerous environment with limited resources while people's lives depended on her performance. Choi Sung-ho's military training had literally included preparation for torture, and the escape began on day 27 of captivity, during what should have been a routine transfer of Kim Naeun to the testing chamber. 3 weeks of constant communication through wall taps had allowed the humans to plan every detail with the precision of a military operation. Naeun had been studying the guard rotations for weeks, timing their movements down to the second. The aliens were efficient but predictable. They followed exact schedules and protocols without variation. More importantly, they had never faced prisoners who fought back. As 2 Velthari guards reached for her arms to escort her from the cell, Naeun moved with the lightning speed of someone trained in mountain rescue emergency response. Her hands shot out and grabbed the energy weapon from the first guard's belt before he could react. The alien made a sound of surprise and tried to pull away, but Naeun had already reversed the weapon and pressed it against his torso. The energy discharge that would have caused minor discomfort to a human sent the Velthari into immediate shock. He collapsed, twitching and unable to move. The second guard reached for his communication device, but Naeun was already moving. A simple pressure point strike to the alien's neck, a technique that would barely stun a human, dropped him instantly. The Velthari nervous system was far more fragile than their confident exterior suggested. Phase 1 complete, Naeun called, out to the other cells as she grabbed the access keys from the unconscious guards. Within 30 seconds, all 5 humans were free and armed with captured weapons. The energy weapons felt familiar in their hands. The basic design was similar to human tools, just more advanced. "Remember," Choi Sung-ho said as he checked his weapon, "these aliens have pain tolerance equivalent to human children. What feels like a gentle push to us will completely incapacitate them." The humans moved through the facility like a coordinated special forces unit, which in many ways they had become. Weeks of shared planning through wall communications had turned 5 strangers into a perfectly synchronized team. Lee Dongwoo led them through the maintenance passages he had memorized from the facility's electrical hum patterns. His engineering analysis had been correct. The service tunnels provided access to every part of the station while avoiding main security sensors. "Power junction ahead," he whispered. "We can disable their communications from there, but it will also trigger emergency lockdown protocols." "How long until security response?" Kang Minho asked. "Based on their efficiency patterns, approximately 4 minutes until armed response, 8 minutes until full facility lockdown." "More than enough time," Naeun said. "Sung-ho, you and Minho take the control room. Ji-hye and I will secure the research data. Dongwoo, can you keep their systems confused?" "I've been planning system intrusions for 3 weeks." Dongwoo smiled grimly. "Their computer security is about 20 years behind human standards." The humans split up and moved to their targets with the efficiency of people who had been planning this operation since the day they were captured. In the control room, Minho and Sung-ho encountered 6 Velthari technicians who immediately activated security alerts. The humans didn't even need to use their weapons. The sight of freed prisoners was enough to send most of the aliens into panic. "Please don't hurt us," one technician begged in Galactic Standard. "We were just following orders." "We're not going to hurt you," Sung-ho said calmly as he zip-tied the aliens with improvised restraints. "But you're going to help us understand exactly what you've been doing here." The Velthari were so terrified of potential human retaliation that they began confessing everything immediately. Decades of research into torture and pain tolerance across 47 species, plans to use the information for conquest and control, the location of other research facilities throughout Confederation space. "You tortured us for scientific research?" Minho asked incredulously. "That's your excuse?" "We needed to understand your weaknesses," the lead technician whimpered. "Every species has a breaking point. We just needed to find yours." "Our breaking point." Minho looked at Seung-ho and began laughing. You have no idea what humans consider a breaking point, do you? Meanwhile, Naon and Jihye had reached the main research laboratory, where Dr. Nexiat was frantically trying to delete his data files. The alien scientist looked up in terror as the two humans entered his sanctuary. "Please," Nexiat said, his forearms raised in surrender. "I was only conducting scientific research. I meant no personal harm." "Scientific research," Jihye repeated, flatly. She moved to the computer terminals and began accessing the files Nexiat had been trying to destroy. "You mean systematic torture of sentient beings for military intelligence purposes? We needed to understand pain tolerance across species for defensive purposes." Naon picked up one of the neural pain inducers and examined it with professional interest. "Defensive purposes, by torturing prisoners and developing better torture techniques." "It's not torture, it's pain tolerance research." "Really?" Naon activated the device and held it near Nexiat's head. The alien immediately collapsed in apparent agony from what humans would consider a mild electrical tingle. "This is what you call scientific research?" Jihye was rapidly downloading everything from the research computers. 47 species studied. Detailed psychological and physical breaking points documented. Methods for inducing maximum suffering with minimum permanent damage. She looked up at Nexiat with clinical coldness. "You're not a scientist. You're a professional torturer." "But you don't understand," Nexiat gasped from the floor. "We needed this information for the security of the Confederation. There are hostile species in the galaxy." "Like humans?" Naon asked. "No, humans are peaceful. You've shown no aggressive tendencies toward other species. Then why did you capture and torture us?" Nexiat had no answer for that. In the computer center, Dongwu was having the time of his life. The Velthari computer systems were advanced but poorly secured. Within minutes, he had access to everything: research files, facility schematics, communication logs, and most importantly, the location and contact information for other human ships in the galaxy. "Got it," he announced over their improvised communication system. Broadcasting location and situation to every human vessel within 50 light years. Also downloading their entire database on galactic politics, trade routes, and military capabilities. "How long until human response?" Shungho asked. 3 human ships within immediate response range. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. "And how long until Confederation military response?" "Based on their communication logs, approximately 18 hours. We'll have company long before they do." The humans regrouped in the main laboratory with their prisoners. They had captured the entire research staff. 12 Velthari scientists and technicians who had spent years developing methods to break the will of other species. "So what do we do with them?" Minho asked, gesturing at the cowering aliens. "We give them a learning experience," Jihye said grimly. She had finished reviewing the research files and was not pleased with what she had found. "They've been studying pain tolerance across the galaxy. I think it's time they got some hands-on education in the subject." "Please," Nexiat begged. "We surrender completely. We'll give you anything you want. Just don't torture us like we did to you." "Torture you?" Seungho looked genuinely confused. "Why would we torture you?" Because that's what we did to you. Revenge. Payback." The humans looked at each other and began laughing. "You think we're going to torture you for revenge?" Naon asked. "That's not how humans work. But you must want to hurt us for what we did." "Of course we do," Dongwu said cheerfully. "But wanting to hurt someone and actually doing it are completely different things. We're not sociopaths." "Then what are you going to do with us?" Jihye smiled coldly. "We're going to give you exactly what you gave us, a comprehensive education in pain tolerance and psychological resistance." The aliens looked terrified until they realized what she meant. "You're going to be our test subjects," Minho explained. "We're going to study Velthari pain tolerance and psychological breaking points using exactly the same methods you used on us. But we'll surrender. We'll tell you everything. You don't need to torture us." "Oh, this isn't about getting information," Shungho said. "This is about scientific research. We need to understand your species' weaknesses for defensive purposes." The Velthari had spent years inflicting pain on other species without considering what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Now they were about to learn firsthand what they had been doing to others. But they were also about to discover something. Much more important, the difference between species that used pain as a weapon and species that had learned to overcome it. The humans had won more than just their freedom. They had turned the tables completely, and the galaxy's professional torturers were about to become students in a subject they had never properly understood. The prey had become the predators, and class was about to begin. The human rescue ships arrived exactly 6 hours after Dongwu's distress signal, just as he had calculated. 3 vessels from the Earth colonial fleet, a medical ship, a research vessel, and a light cruiser for protection. Captain Sarah Chen of the ECS Defiance led the boarding party that docked with the research station. What they found inside changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. "Report, Sergeant Choi," Captain Chen said as she surveyed the scene in the main laboratory. 5 human prisoners freed, 12 alien researchers captured, complete research database secured, Sung Ho reported with military precision. No human casualties. Minor injuries to several alien guards who resisted during initial escape. Minor injuries? They have extremely low pain tolerance, Captain. What would barely inconvenience a human completely incapacitated them. Captain. Chen looked around the laboratory filled with torture devices and brain-scanning equipment. What exactly were they doing here? Systematic torture research, Park Ji-hye said, holding up a datapad with the downloaded files. 47 species studied over 3 centuries. They were developing methods to break the will of any species they encountered. And they tried this on humans? For 3 weeks, Kang Min-ho said. They couldn't understand why we didn't break. Dr. Nexiat, still restrained in one corner of the lab, spoke up weakly. Please, we surrender completely. We'll share all our research. Just don't let them experiment on us like we did to them. Captain Chen looked at the cowering alien scientist with confusion. Experiment on you? What are you talking about? They said they were going to study our pain tolerance using our own methods. And you believed them? Captain Chen turned to her people with amusement. Did any of you actually plan to torture these aliens? Of course not, Nayeon said. We're not monsters, but they don't know that. We told them we were going to give them a comprehensive education in pain tolerance, Lee Dongwu explained with a grin, which is technically true. We are going to educate them about pain tolerance, specifically how to build psychological resistance instead of using torture as a weapon. The human medical team began examining the research data while the rescued prisoners gave detailed reports of their experiences. What emerged was a complete picture of Confederation psychology and military doctrine. They've been using torture as their primary method of controlling other species, Dr. Martinez from the research vessel reported. Their entire approach to diplomacy is based on finding psychological weaknesses to exploit. No wonder they're terrified of us, Captain Chen realized. They can't understand a species that doesn't break under pressure. Over the next several hours, as word of the discovery spread through human space, a remarkable transformation began. The rescued humans became the galaxy's first experts on comparative psychology across species. Their experience as torture survivors had given them unique insights into what made different species strong or vulnerable. Park Ji-hye established a new medical specialty, interspecies trauma treatment and psychological resilience training. Her first-hand experience with alien torture methods, combined with her medical expertise, made her the galaxy's leading authority on treating psychological damage across different species. Most species have never developed proper resistance to psychological pressure, she explained to a gathering of human colonial administrators. They've never needed to. Their societies didn't include the kind of voluntary hardship that humans consider normal. Kang Min-ho became an expert in infrastructure and systems that could withstand extreme stress. His construction background, enhanced by weeks of enduring systematic pressure, gave him insights into building things that wouldn't break under impossible conditions. Human engineering assumes everything will be pushed beyond its design limits, he told a conference of galactic engineers. We build bridges expecting them to survive earthquakes, storms, and floods all at the same time. Most alien infrastructure is built assuming normal conditions will continue forever. Lee Dongwu revolutionized interspecies communication by approaching every contact as an engineering problem to be solved rather than a conflict to be won. His systematic analysis of alien psychology during torture had taught him to understand completely different ways of thinking. Every species processes information differently, he explained to diplomatic corps trainees. Humans think through problems by breaking them down into smaller parts. Other species might think in patterns, emotions, or hierarchies. Understanding the mental framework is more important than learning the language. Kim Nayan became the galaxy's premier specialist in emergency response and rescue operations. Her mountain rescue experience, combined with her analysis of alien facility security during captivity, made her uniquely qualified to help other species develop proper emergency protocols. Most alien civilizations have never developed real disaster response capabilities, she reported to the Colonial Emergency Management Agency. They've never faced situations where normal systems completely break down and people have to improvise survival solutions. Choi Seung-ho established the first interspecies military resistance training programs. His military background and torture survival experience created new standards for preparing soldiers to operate under extreme pressure. Human military training assumes soldiers will be captured, tortured, injured, and abandoned behind enemy lines, he told a gathering of colonial defense officials. Most alien species train their soldiers assuming they'll always have support, supplies, and clear orders. When those assumptions fail, they collapse. But the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The Confederation. Council met in emergency session within days of the research station incident. For the first time in their history, they faced a species that was completely immune to their primary method of control. The humans cannot be conquered through traditional means, Admiral Kethvar reported to the assembled council members. Torture only makes them stronger. Isolation turns them into philosophers. Pressure turns them into problem solvers. Then how do we control them? General Yexthul demanded. We don't, Admiral Kethvar said simply. We negotiate with them as equals. The word equals had never been used in a Confederation military briefing before. Every previous species had been categorized as either superior, to be allied with, or inferior, to be conquered or controlled. Humans were the first species that fit neither category. They're not superior to us in technology or resources, the IAD Admiral continued. But they're completely immune to our methods of establishing dominance. They're different. Dr. Nexiot, now under house arrest pending diplomatic negotiations, provided his final research report from his cell. Human psychological resistance is not based on superior biology or advanced technology, he wrote. It is based on cultural conditioning spanning thousands of years. They have systematically trained their entire species to endure and overcome extreme adversity as a normal part of their development. Recommendation: do not attempt to control or conquer humans through conventional means. They have been preparing for exactly these challenges their entire evolutionary history. Instead, seek partnership based on mutual benefit and shared goals. The report concluded with a warning that changed galactic politics forever. Humans do not fear pain, isolation, or psychological pressure because they use these as training tools. They become stronger under adversity rather than weaker. Any species that attempts to break human will through suffering will only succeed in making humans more determined, more unified, and more dangerous. Most importantly, humans do not seek conquest or domination of other species, but they also will not accept conquest or domination by others. They are a species that has learned to thrive under impossible conditions. Making them your enemy would be the greatest strategic mistake in galactic history. The Confederation's response was unprecedented, a formal apology to humanity and an invitation to join the galactic community as full equals. The research station was turned over to human control, and Dr. Nexiot's torture research was destroyed by mutual agreement. But humans didn't seek revenge or domination. Instead, they did something the galaxy had never seen before. They began teaching other species how to be stronger. Human universities opened their doors to alien students who wanted to learn psychological resilience. Human athletes began training alien competitors in endurance and mental toughness. Human emergency responders shared their knowledge with species that had never faced real disasters. We're not better than other species, Captain Chen explained, to the first Interspecies Cooperation Summit. We're just different. We've had harder lives, so we've learned different skills. But those skills can be taught. The galaxy's professional torturers became students in a new school, one that taught strength instead of exploitation, resilience instead of domination, and cooperation instead of conquest. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that humans had known for thousands of years but had never needed to explain. Suffering doesn't break you unless you let it. Pain is just information. Fear is just a feeling. And the impossible is just another problem waiting to be solved. The aliens had studied human pain tolerance thinking it would help them break humanity. Instead, they discovered that humans don't shatter under pressure. They